Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and today, as always, we've got another incredible guest for you. This time, he's from kind of all over. He's got a New Jersey phone number, but I'm pretty sure he lives in Florida. He can handle the humidity and probably the politics and everything else up there. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Actually, I don't know. Maybe if I was in his shoes,
a little bit of that. To be real, we can talk about that if we have time, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Anyways, his name is Douglas J. Beck, and one of the reasons I had him on here is because one of his key things that he believes in is that he's able to talk about and share the benefits of taking the leap and going from the corporate world and a life into entrepreneurship. And so we're going to have him talk about that. But just so you get to know a little bit about him, he was in corporate IT and procurement for several years. And then in 2015, he finally gave up his 9-to-5, said, I'm done. I want more freedom. I want the opportunities that come to somebody who has their own business. And so he got into real estate, hasn't looked back, and is just loving his life. And one of the things you learn about a lot of entrepreneurs is they have, once they get good at their craft, then they start sharing it. And so they end up becoming not just an entrepreneur and an investor, but, a consultant, coach, strategist, and speaker. And so he's awesome at what he does. And I'm excited to pick his brain as well to help you guys learn more about yourselves and, more importantly, how you can take the leap and create your own meaningful legacy. So, Douglas, before we get started too into it, share with us your story and where you came from. Why did you go the real estate route? Why did you go the corporate route? What was the circumstances that created you?
For sure. So I appreciate the opportunity, Sam, and looking forward to helping folks in your audience get a lot of value, hopefully, from this conversation. So taking you back, I've been an athlete my whole life, pretty much. So athletics was a part of my story, I guess, from the high school point and going into college. And kind of originally, believe it or not, in college, I was going to study physics. So a completely different, interesting fact about me, I guess. I've switched over to business, and basically I was an athlete. I played basketball my whole life, and from a young age, my dad and my mom really kind of planted some seeds for entrepreneurship and competitive nature with the athletics, and also being around the family business. But my dad was also a corporate guy himself, so he was a J&J guy, Johnson & Johnson, for over 40 years. Kind of growing up around that, and also with the athletic kind of drive and competition. My sister, a couple other siblings were also athletics as well. And I think a combination of kind of seeing my dad and then also having the family business on the side from a young age, when I was probably 9-10 years old, combined with my athletic kind of background, led me to where I got to, which is entrepreneurship and have my own business. But the kind of way I got there was a lot of different scenarios that kind of played into that. So again, observing my father be corporate for 40 years, but also kind of knowing that he had a side gig going with my family's business, which was a hair salon business, still in business today. And then also seeing, his sort of push for me to be exploring different things from teenage years. In high school, I was doing small business kind of IT consulting, if you can call it that, where I was helping local business owners really figure out how to use their technology. And this was probably in the mid to late 90s when computers were just kind of becoming a thing for PCs. Essentially, they were big white boxes and they had big CRT monitors and stuff like that. So it wasn't really the stuff we use today, like in our palm of our hands, and the internet was kind of just getting going and stuff like that. So I remember doing some QuickBooks for a guy who had a carpet store next to my folks' hair salon, and that was probably my first kind of job, I guess, or side gig while I was going to school in high school. And then kind of evolved into, interest and sort of getting some experience with entrepreneurship, but really still looking at the whole concept of, from young age, my dad was always about, typical go to school, get a good job, go into, work for somebody else. And it wasn't a bad thing because he had done that and he had raised a family of 7 kids, me being one of them. So having that structure, having that certainty, but still kind of exploring what else you can do to kind of grow on the side. And that was kind of a nice mix I found. So went to college, competed athletically, did track and field, shot put and discus, did really well with that, and continued to grow academically as well. Decided to switch from physics over to business, which is a big switch, obviously. But ended up being a great decision for myself because I explored entrepreneurship in college. And so I was an entrepreneurship major with CIT or CIS, learning about technology and entrepreneurship. But that led me to a place where, as a combination of kind of my life experience up to that point when I was in college, I was 20 something, 20, 21. My professor at the time was the head of the CIS department. He's like, look, you're doing great and stuff like that. And he was giving me kudos, like, you're one of our top academic students. You're also an athlete, this and that. He's like, we have a connection with, this company, Johnson & Johnson, coincidentally, that's looking for one of our top, handful of students in this program that are recommendations we would make to go into their leadership development program. So long story short, I got to give him a quick kudos. Dr. Amadio from Rider University, where I graduated back in 2007, made the recommendation. And I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to have an interview with J&J when I was still a junior, at the end of my junior year, and then essentially made the decision with my dad's help, also being legacy from J&J and plus the recommendation from my college and all this kind of stuff put together. Ended up taking a position with J&J right out of college. So like my senior year, still did well. I didn't fail out of college or like that, but I basically took a little bit lighter of a load, if you would, and focused on my athletics, but also still got through my academics. I already had accepted a job offer that landed me in corporate, coming out of college, working at J&J full time. And it was awesome, actually. I mean, I thought it was the right decision at that time. I had still, the interest and the drive to have my own business. I was still doing like web development type stuff and IT stuff on the side for people that I knew. I was doing different projects. Like at one point I was working with a friend that was trying to launch a business online before like kind of Yelp got really big. We were doing like basically restaurant specials, and we were going to have this thing where it was like a platform and things. And I was the developer. I was the IT guy doing the work to help develop the site. That led to some other stuff. So anyway, kind of explored in the process of being corporate, kind of early on. Didn't have anything that was significant enough. At the time, I was engaged to my wife, kind of going into that corporate position. I was getting engaged, getting ready to start a family. So I had some requirements, which a lot of people, I think, probably financially, they're driven by certainty to make sure they have like enough money coming in basically to pay their bills and stuff. So that was a big part of my decision to continue and also to learn a lot. I mean, I learned a bunch in corporate America. It's not necessarily a horrible place to be for a lot of people. I think you just got to know how to not kind of, enslave yourself into this mindset or methodology that limits your ability. That's what I at least tried to do. I tried to break free from some of the sort of the limitations that were there and push against the envelope, so to speak. And so I spent, about 4 years working in like kind of pure IT type work where I was doing enterprise security and I was doing process documentation, Lean Six Sigma type work with J&J. I was doing a little bit of procurement. I tried for the rotational program I had joined. I was accepted into the leadership development program there. And essentially from completing that, I decided that procurement, which was basically negotiating contracts with IT suppliers, was really the place I felt most comfortable because it blended the IT with the business elements that I was interested in. So I was able to get into some really interesting scenarios. At that time I was an analyst, so I was doing a lot of technical work, like as far as Excel, like macros and VLOOKUPs, all kinds of cool technical stuff. But I was part of a team that was negotiating some big contracts for J&J to negotiate better deals for their IT stuff. So did that for a few years full time after I graduated sort of the rotational program as an employee still, but kind of went into this now officially like not part of a rotational program and now just on my own essentially as a regular employee. And I had a really good experience overall. I met a lot of great people, got a good element of like dealing with salespeople actually, because we, as procurement, you're buying from salespeople essentially. And essentially what that turned into was, my interest to continue in that. Although, this is where corporate got a little tricky for me because there was a limit to how high I can go in the position and the amount of experience I had. And layered in with that, I had also my family life. So I didn't want to relocate to a different place at the time because we're trying to stay in New Jersey. That was back in, 2012 or something like that, or 2010, 2012 timeframe. So we were still staying in New Jersey, my wife's family, my family. Want to be around them. There was opportunities to go like to a different country maybe, but that wasn't of interest at the time. Now it is kind of, if I had an opportunity to travel like that, I definitely would take up on it. But ultimately, where it landed me was pretty much at a place where there wasn't the way to move up quickly or as quickly as I wanted to. And so I started looking to different functions within J&J, but still kind of within the IT space. And so I rotated into reporting and business intelligence and that kind of thing, which was different than the procurement. But I essentially supported, some of the people that were the higher ups effectively for data understanding and sort of taking big data and narrowing it down to really reports that look visually appealing and stuff, and kind of putting it into review for bigger decision making and planning. So it was cool. I mean, it was definitely corporate, like you're talking about that particular business unit. I can't go specifically to the numbers, but it was hundreds of millions of dollars that we were managing as far as spend and stuff, and making sure that we were making the right decisions of what tools we use and kind of what people we were using and stuff like that. And so basically, I heard someone else on one of your episodes talk about, the experience that they got from corporate. I think someone must have mentioned this, and they said it's not a horrible thing. It's just, you use it maybe as a stepping stone for the people that are truly entrepreneurial. So I think that's really kind of what happened with me, is that I took as much as I could from the experience of being in corporate and really being around some really great people that probably were also limited in some ways that they most likely didn't talk about as much, but they felt, I could feel certain people I became friends with in the process were telling me certain things that kind of allude to certain factors, but they felt stuck. A lot of people probably feel stuck. And I think it's great that what you're doing is helping people get kind of unstuck from that limitation of being in that matrix, if you would. And so I guess, to kind of pull it all together, that led into, as I was in corporate, kind of exploring different ways to continue to generate more income. And for me, it was always like, as I had my family, I have 3 children. So my oldest, I don't know how old he was exactly when I started looking at really specifically, probably was a few years old, 2, 3 years old, started looking at different entrepreneurial things really seriously. And then my daughter, coincidentally, was just born when I decided that I'm going to leave my job, but I didn't actually leave. I just decided, I was like, I know I'm going to leave. It's just a matter of like, she's another reminder why I have to leave, And so that was in 2014, actually, about a year and a half before I decided to actually leave. But it just, I think everybody has different reasons. People I work with, it's like figuring out what's going to motivate you to want to change, what's going to motivate you to have the need to leave or have the need to create a different sort of day-to-day routine for yourself. I'm sure there's a lot of different things we'll get into today, but one of the things that I struggle with as an entrepreneur now is there's so much opportunity actually that you got to figure out what to focus on. And when you start realizing that, I went from having, when I was doing kind of part-time entrepreneurship as a corporate employee, which was about a year and a half, 2 years of significant time there of doing side hustle kind of thing, thinking about making sure I'm continuing to keep my manager happy, making sure I'm delivering my results in corporate, but still having another 3 to 5 hours a day somehow of getting work done for my business. That was a struggle, but that kind of reminded me of the importance of having structure. And then when I went full time, quote unquote, into sort of entrepreneurship without the corporate structure, when I decided to leave, the biggest problem I had was what do I do with all my time now? I have to make sure I control my time because now someone else isn't controlling it anymore. I got to make sure I design my schedule and stuff. So that's just, some kind of I guess taking you back kind of far to bring you to kind of where I'm at to some extent. We can go into specifics, but I don't know if you want to ask any additional questions about that or where you want to go from here.
Yeah, I've got a page here. There's no way we're getting through all of this. So okay. That's good. That's how I like it because I don't want to get through everything. I want to be able to talk to you again and be excited about it.
Sure.
I want to exhaust our friendship right away. But I think that there's some things that I just want to ask and highlight. What do you feel like were the best 1 or 2 beliefs or identities that you gained from athletics?
Man, that's a really good question. I would say, from a very young age, it was all about team, right? There's no I in team. That's definitely a big thing. So as an entrepreneur, a lot of folks start off as solopreneurs, but for me, you have to make that decision. If you want to really grow a business and not just have another job, we could talk more detail on this, but you have to have a team usually, or a process or something to help you do what you're doing. So I think that's been something that's carried forward, the team concept. I think discipline and focus, right? Focus discipline, I guess you could say. So having that structure again, but the challenge we have, I think, as people is that nobody wants too much structure where you feel like you're in a box and you just can't, you can't control your time, you can't control your focus. So it's like having enough structure. So in a sport, you have to have, you have a start and an end time for the game. You have a certain process, certain rules to follow and stuff, but you can still play the game. There's certain people that play because they're talented and some people play it different than other people. And some people are better than others and such. So they understand the rules and they're able to operate in that sort of game of rules, right? It's essentially what it is. And they train for it, they practice, and they stay regimented and they stay disciplined and they stay focused on mastering their craft. So I think that's, understanding the rules and being able to become a master at the game, that whether, Mark Cuban, then he talks about the game of business, right? Or this business like a sport, basically. So it's like, that's how I think of it too. It's like, I'm getting up every day to grow my business. It's like, I got to think about how can I operate in this? How do I get better at this? How do I grow myself? And how do I grow my business? But if I could take the elements of what I learned as an athlete, kind of apply it in my business, that's going to help me probably,
Mm-hmm.
So those are a couple of the key ones that come to mind right now.
Yeah, I love it. So what I wrote down, just to double check and make sure we're clear here: teamwork, focus, discipline, and then how to understand. And I wrote down how to manipulate the rules of the game, because it's not really and manipulate. I'm not saying it from a bad word, but like, you've got to understand. So I think an example of this, and although I hate the principle I'm going to teach here, but it is good at the same time. Have you ever read The 4-Hour Workweek with Tim Ferriss?
Oh yeah, it's one of my favorite books. 100%.
So like, it's great. I hate how he became the world champion of kickboxing, though. I'm just like, but as much as I hate that, I also think understanding the rules and how to win, you have to define your objective. And that's something that oftentimes people don't define their objective in the beginning. And so then they're chasing and they're winning the wrong game. They're winning the wrong way. I have another friend who his kids are in school and he hates that they're incentivized to get A's. And so he's like, I actually celebrate when they get a D or an F. Right? I celebrate because I want to teach my child it's good to fail. Like, it's actually okay to fail. Just keep trying. Right. And I'm thinking, if I ever put my kids in school, which I probably won't, but if I ever did, I'd be like, hey, I will actually throw you a whole party if you can get 100% of those problems wrong. Like, that's a skill in itself.
Learn from making mistakes, right?
Yeah. Can you flawlessly get every one of those problems wrong? Like, and make sure that if you know the answer, you definitely don't choose it. Because I want to teach different skills. But so when you were in high school and younger sports, what was the transition like when you went from the younger or the high school type sports, and then you took it from, it's all still sports. The rules didn't change that much. Obviously, there's some rules that are different collegiately than in high school, but the intensity, the focus, like, what was the transition? And again, back to the identities, going from just average sports to collegiate level sports. And then there would be another transition going into pro, if that was the direction you went. But what was that transition like, and how does that apply to the rest of our lives?
Man, that's a great question. There was definitely sort of an increased level of competitiveness, an increased level of discipline, everything elevated to a level an expectation, right? So I think that's an important word probably as well for your audience to understand. There's expectations we should have of ourselves and expectations of others. I think that, to your point, like, sometimes our expectations are too high. But when you're competing in collegiate athletics and also in business, probably there's a certain level of expectation that's a must no matter what. It doesn't matter. There's no opinions about it. Just like, if like I was a thrower, right? So I threw shot put, discus, and hammer. So I was attempting to go Olympic in my mind, right? That was my competitive nature. Like, I'm going against myself also every time I step in the circle. So I'm looking for my personal record, my PR, or some people call my PB, my personal best. And for me, kind of going into college, I had a certain level that I had hit in high school. And I was essentially, as I looked at schools to go to, I was looking at schools that would be interested in letting me, participate in their Division I, track program, potentially get some scholarship money, which I was able to do, get some partial scholarship for that, and also academics. But the point is, I had a commitment from my college to achieve a certain level of success, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be qualified to be on the team, basically. I mean, and there's guys that got cut from the team. So, like, if you don't academically perform, for example, that's a bar none minimum. You have to get like a C average or better, right? If you're not getting C's, if you're getting D's and F's, you can't participate in collegiate athletes, at least Division I. And that's governed by certain things, intercollegiately, I think, and even with the schools individually. But besides that, from an athletics perspective, and you talk about elevating your expectation, it was about like training, right? As far as disciplined, practice and regimented lifting. And we were lifting like Olympic lifters. We were doing power cleans in the morning, 7 a.m. I wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, not to go backwards, but I enjoyed college. Like, I did very well. I graduated magna cum laude. I did well in my academics. I did well in my athletics. I was lucky. I was blessed. But I also knew how to have fun too. Let's put it that way. So I stayed out of trouble, right? But my friends and I would throw parties. We'd have people over our dorm room and stuff like that when we were of age and stuff. And so I definitely enjoyed college for what it was worth. But I also knew how to balance that. At the same time, I had an expectation in my head of like, I have to do this. Otherwise, I'm risking everything that I did to get here by not doing this. So what I'm saying is sometimes I go to bed at 2 or 3 in the morning after a fun night with my friends, and I wake up at 6 o'clock the next day. But I did that religiously because I knew I had to do it. My expectation of myself was that if I didn't do this, it'd be a big problem. I'd go to the gym for 7 o'clock, lift for like an hour, hour and a half with my team. And then I would go a full day, a full schedule effectively of going to class, right, and doing my academics. Obviously meals and all that stuff. But then as soon as I was done for the day, I would go back out to the field and throw for another hour or two. So essentially training was like, 3 to 4 hours a day, typically from Monday through Saturday. Sunday was the only day we had off. And even on Sunday, sometimes we would train in the afternoon as team members, right? We just get a disc or get a shot and go on the field and throw a little bit. Because we're almost like addicted to it. Like we're like excited about it, like it's something you just develop a passion for. So I think that created a lot of routine, a lot of discipline. Like I said before, the competitive drive drove even higher, and actually, internal competition with myself was significant at that time. So, and this might sound weird to some of your listeners, but I thought of myself as a beast, like in a positive way. Like I'm a beast. Like I'm going to kill this disc or this shot. I'm going to throw it as far as I possibly can. And I'm going to own it. Like it's mine. Like it's not going to control me. Like I'm going to break free from whatever limitation it thinks it can have. I don't care how heavy it is. I don't care how far it doesn't want to go. I'm going to let this thing go as far as possible. And every time I get in the circle, my goal is to throw it harder and faster than I've ever thrown before. And so like every single throw I took, even in practice, even, things that we were doing drills with, I'd always push to my highest limit. And I wouldn't be afraid of failing ever. I would just be like, I'm not going to fail. I would convince myself and believe it. And that drive, and I've done some work, personal development work, like with Tony Robbins, for example, and some of the things he does. And I would take myself back in some of the visualizations, and I would think about the time I was an athlete in college. It's so funny you mentioned this because this is such a big part of my subconscious, right? And when you have that experience, and some people have different experiences, like as members of the military, for example, and the way that they were in their discipline with that, or whatever life experience they had, like people have positive and negative experiences from these like significantly like focused things that they do. Even corporate, probably some people are like, they have like almost like PTSD, for like going through corporate America because it's just a lot of work. Sometimes you're getting pushed all different directions. So for me, though, it was a positive, thank God, experience with my athletic stuff in college. And it was a level of expectation, like I said, that drove me. And so that transition to your point about like how that took forward in terms of what I am now, what I do now, it created a level of expectation for myself that sometimes might be unrealistic. So I have to check that at times. But it also gave me the drive and ambition that a lot of people just frankly can't compete with, not to sound arrogant, but like some of my peers in the space don't have that because they weren't in that space. They weren't training 3-4 hours a day. They weren't getting 4 hours of sleep a night. They weren't, forcing themselves to be at a certain level. And it's like, yeah, I was, in college, notwithstanding an injury, which sounds like very typical, and it was junior year, right before the Northeastern competition. I was a top 10 thrower in the East Coast for discus in college at Division I. If I was top 5, I would have potentially gone to nationals and could have gone for Olympic qualification. So like I was right there. But of course, junior year, the old story you hear about athletes sometimes, like I got injured, like because I was going too hard, right? I was having too much fun with my friends, and I messed up my foot, my turning foot. And so I couldn't put weight on my left foot, which is the foot you turn on when you're doing a circle. In the circle, you're spinning. And that's what I did for discus and stuff. So that set me back like 3 to 6 months, right, of training. So I had to recoup all that and start all over kind of the next season, which was my senior year. So that kind of sucked. But the good news again was like for my life, when I look back at that, Sam, I think, man, like if that didn't happen, I definitely wouldn't be who I am right now. I might be in a whole different trajectory. I could have potentially gone to Olympics, but then it's like, with all due respect to people that are in the Olympic level, I know some people, friends of mine that went in different directions with Olympics. One girl, I actually went to college with one woman. She did some amazing things with the Olympics and actually went in a different sport of bobsledding, which is cool. But I don't know precisely, like their life is pretty much focused just on that sport, right? They're everything is centered around. Then you start getting into like sponsorships, all different kinds of stuff. So like they're almost like obsessed with it. I probably wouldn't be the family man I am, right? It's just like crazy. So yeah, so that's kind of just some thoughts there for you. But
yeah, we're not done because I love this. And what I love about sports is they're great for analogies. I ran track and field, and I've never thought of this analogy with track and field because generally I'm just like, kind of just is a weird thing. But one thing that's interesting about track and field, I would also say certain aspects of tennis, like if you're playing singles or doubles. If you're playing doubles, it's different. But if you're playing singles or golf, and those are at least 3 that I know of. I don't know. They are team sports, but they're really not. I mean, they're very much individual sports. And your goal is really to how do we get a team number? And oftentimes you think, well, do I really, if I if I do a little bit better, is it really going to help my team win because it's an individual thing?
Yeah.
Right? And although you want your team to win the track meet, the way they calculate who wins a track meet is fascinating in and of itself. But I think that oftentimes we need to focus on this, and that is that when you are in those sports, a lot of times you are playing for yourself. And same thing in business. Oftentimes you think you're playing for your own business. And specifically with competition in business, and we're going to say competition, the people that are also doing what you're doing, I work in a financial space, and it's sometimes very competitive, and there's a lot of like backbiting and like, that company's terrible, you should come work at this company or that company. And it's just like, we're all in the same thing, and we should have one goal, one focus, one objective, right? So in real estate, the objective could be, hey, we want to create affordable housing for everybody, right? We're not trying to like jack up the prices so that nobody can buy a house. We actually want more. Right. We want more movement. We want this. So rather than you as an agent negotiating some unrealistic deal for one client and screwing everybody else over, how about we all work together? And this is why unions were created, although I think unions have some bad features to them. I understand the concept of like, how do we learn how to all play together as an industry whole? Yeah. Even though we are all competing and jockeying for position on an individual level, how do we play for an industry or for an economy or for a country, right? Because although you are individual, you're also part of the whole. And that doesn't, I don't feel like that is the same in a full team sport like football, soccer, basketball.
Right.
Because there it's like you don't win or lose by yourself, but still have your team lose.
Right.
Generally.
I was a basketball player my whole life up until high school pretty much. And that's when I just stopped. I didn't grow fast enough. I grew stronger, right? But I didn't grow tall enough to play my position. So I get it 100%. Yeah. Team sports, like true team sports versus the individual with the team element. Yeah. Everything you're saying makes total sense.
Yeah. So it's fascinating. And then the other thing is, as you moved up from high school into college, and there are some people in the lower high school, grade school, whatever, like that are doing competition teams and they're really focused on it. But a lot of people, they're just kind of doing their own thing in high school, and then they maybe get a scholarship to college, and then they don't really realize how much more effort has to go in. And this happens in life. You're playing business, you're playing a little hobby business, or you're in corporate America, and you're not really focused on. There's so much more time put in out of regulation, both play and scheduled practice time that pros are putting in. And oftentimes in business or in entrepreneurship, people are thinking, well, I'm going to come in, I'm just going to do what I see everybody else doing. And the people who are winning, they're looking at what everybody else is doing, and they're like, how do I double that effort? How do I put twice as much in?
Yeah.
How can I work out twice as hard? And it can get to a bad point where you hurt your leg or something.
Right.
But
I mean, on my part, it was actually, just being vulnerable. Like I wasn't playing my sport when I got hurt. I was out with my buddies messing around and, dancing around like an idiot basically, but having a fun time out, and it was the wrong time. It was like a few nights before the Northeastern competition, IC4As. And I went there, but I watched my teammates compete while I'm on crutches. I ripped the tendon from my heel to my big toe basically.
That's worse. But point is, in life, as a mother, as a son, as a daughter, as a father, as an uncle, grandma, grandpa, as a business owner, as a religious leader, how much time are you putting in outside of regulation, schedule, especially religion? That's a whole nother thing where it's like you go to church on Sunday and you think you're good, but like, are you putting in the effort to maintain your faith outside of that? Are you putting in the effort outside of your family scheduled prayer time or scripture study, whatever? Are you putting in individual personal time into these activities, or are you just kind of coasting, hoping that the structures around you are good enough to take you to where you need to be? And I think that's a huge thing I wanted to hit. And then the other thing is that I don't know how you said it, but what I wrote down was you want to push to failure, right? So many people, they're scared of failure, but what I've experienced is the pros, once they figure they think they have something, they're like a scientist. They're like, okay, this is working really good. At what point does this break? Like everything they're doing, they're pushing to failure. They're not scared of failure. They're like, where is failure? Like, how do I find failure? Once I find it, how do I mitigate it so I can get to the next failure, right? They're excited. If they're successful, it's almost depressing. It's demoralizing because they're thinking about this success is good, but obviously there's more. There's another level. If I'm sustaining right here, if I'm getting comfortable, that means my failure is that I'm missing out on opportunity cost of being more successful. And exactly. That is failure. When you're missing out on opportunity cost of more success, that's failure. And when I'm saying success, for those of you listening, I'm not talking about financial success specifically. I'm talking about life success, family success, relationship success.
Yeah.
Children, like anything, cleaning. Yep. How are you cleaning your house? Are you getting a little lazy? Is it getting dusty? You know, if I put on your mantle, is there dust there? Like every level of your life, are you pushing to failure to find out what systems could be improved, or are you getting complacent with where you're at? So anyways, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
No, I think, just to clarify, and what you're saying is 100%, I believe it's accurate 100%. The failure concept that I saw it as in college, and I still carry forward, although it's tougher to do now because I know some certain limits that I can get to. Failure didn't almost even exist for me. Like failure only existed when I met it because I realized I couldn't go any further, right? Like I couldn't get past a certain mark. And the gym, like I was, always trying to push beyond what I could do. I didn't have a limit in my mind. I just had to work towards this unlimited potential that I felt like, and that was part of my subconscious programming, my training, my coach, people that helped me get to that point. It wasn't just being by myself. I mean, you believe and you embody. I think a lot of competitive athletes would probably appreciate that. Like if they've been through that experience, like having somebody in your corner. And we had multiple coaches. We had a strength training coach, we had our head coach, we had a throws coach, like people pushing us all different directions. And then our team itself was, camaraderie. Like you said you did track. So like the runners and the sprinters would even push the throwers and vice versa. Like we would do sprints. Like I was in college, I'm 6'4", right? And I was like 320 in college. And right now I'm like 270-ish, but I'm still a big guy. But the point is I was solid. I was strong, but I was also like, I carried a lot of weight around, but we're sprinting, doing like, 100-meter dashes, 50-meter dash, like all kinds of doing not hurdles, but like basically hopping over like, the hurdles and stuff like that, doing the stuff for our hips and power lifting and things like that. So we were training so many different ways, but there was no limit in our minds basically of how we could train and how far we could potentially get to. And that was so like that feeling, it's hard to describe to someone that's never seen that maybe, but if you can get your mind to open up, as that's part of like breaking free from that corporate kind of limitation thing, that there isn't really a limit. We just put a limit on it because we kind of second guess our ability and we don't actually taste that feeling of like failure far enough down the line. We kind of we self-limit, I think, really a lot of times. I find myself doing that, right? And so also you said about what was the second point you had there? Because you had me on something. Checking the boxes. Like, it's kind of like, I go to church and I don't believe in God. Like I wear this cross on my chest. I'm a man of God. I don't just wear it because I like wearing it. I got this was a present from my wife, but I wear it because I want people to know that I feel I'm a man of faith and I put that first and I want people to know it. I'm not afraid to tell people that, and if someone doesn't believe what I believe in, but it's who I am as an individual. I have a spiritual being within me. And I pray with my kids. Me personally, everyone can choose their own thing, but I don't just go to church and check the box. I went to church, I went to mass, and I got my communion or whatever. Like, I think that a lot of people want to just check boxes. And that's why, like, even the corporate methodology, the sort of mantra of like 9 to 5, it's more or less you're checking in at 9, you're leaving at 5. And to me, like, when I'm recruiting people to work for our companies, like, I'm not looking for the guy or gal that's going to just check the box. I got in at 9 o'clock, I'm on time, and I'm leaving at 5. I want the person that's a self-starter, that doesn't mind working a little extra hours, that's willing to put in the effort, especially if they're working on like a commission basis, which a lot of people that we bring in do, because we're a very heavy sales-centric type company. And so, I guess the message there is like, I'd rather people, if I can PSA, I guess, right? Don't be a box checker, like be a doer and be a creator and be like, I'm going to beyond my belief of what's possible kind of thing. Like, don't limit yourself and don't be the box checking individual and think that you're making it. That's probably why you're not where you want to be, frankly. I mean, most people I work with, that's what I tell them. Is like, people will come to me, how do I do real estate? How do I fix and flip houses? How do I do what we do and stuff? And it's like, there isn't necessarily like a system precisely down to every single step that if you follow this exact process, no matter what, you're going to have success. Like, it's not like that. There's certain things that will happen as like milestones, but it's not so scientific where it's like, you check this thing, good, you're done. And that one, next one. It's like, steps to follow, yes, but not a lack of variation,
Yeah. Everybody I know is successful in real estate. It's like you work your butt off and you refuse to fail. Like, you refuse to give up and you just keep going. And when a deal falls through, you go to the next one and the next one and the next one, and you'll if you do that consistently, the only box to check is consistency. And the only way to check that sucker is do it every freaking day. You can't check the box of consistency and be done being consistent. The box to check is consistency, and you that's due every day. And every morning,
it's a non-negotiable, man. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know?
That's funny. So you mentioned something I want to just clarify here.
Yep.
I don't know how long QuickBooks has been around. This is just going to be a blip conversation, but
Okay.
I thought it was funny. Did you actually help somebody with QuickBooks, or did you help somebody with budgeting? And you said QuickBooks because that's the brand name of what?
No, that's so funny. Like. No, this was back then it was QuickBooks desktop only. There was no QuickBooks online. So it was literally the guy had like a CD-ROM, and my dad was he worked at J&J as like a financial guy, financial consulting and stuff at IT. And he was a programmer effectively for financing systems. Like they used their general ledger and things like that. But he was into like, Quicken and QuickBooks before it became like a really big prolific thing that we talk about now. But yeah, it was literally QuickBooks. My dad helped set up the chart of accounts. I pretty much showed the guy how to track his transactions. I kind of showed him how to use a mouse. Like he didn't know how to use a mouse. Right. I'm not going to say who it is exactly, but he's probably not going to ever see this video either. But I mean, look, he was probably in his, I would say at that time, probably 30s. It was in 1990s. Like for God's sake, give the guy a break. But, it was desktop computers. It was probably a 486, with a 12 or 15 inch monitor, whatever it was back then, with the big CRT white monitors. Yep. And it didn't have internet, it was all localized. So he would save the stuff on like a floppy disk or something on the computer. It was like a data file, It was very archaic. But yeah, it was QuickBooks, man.
What do you mean it was archaic? It was top of the line technology when
back then it was,
now it's archaic.
Exactly. Yeah.
Those floppy disks, that's crazy. That's cool. So it was actually QuickBooks. I was curious about that. Yeah. That's some good branding. If even hindsight, we're just calling it QuickBooks because it's
it was like 25 years ago, man. It was like probably the infancy of the company or something. Intuit, I don't know if even Intuit owned it at that time. I don't know what it was.
Yeah. So I want to transition into the leadership program. I've toyed around with this with my business, only recruiting people into leadership programs. I'm not sure. I want to know what that looked like for J&J. Like, what does a leadership program look like coming out of college? Where do they start you? What are the kind of the key things, metrics? How long is the program? Like, what does that look like?
For sure. So, I mean, goes without saying, I know I can share certain things that are not like confidential or anything like that. It's been a long time, but I'll share what I can. So basically, it was a 2-year long program. It was rotational. So essentially the commitment was that coming into the program, there was like a serious amount of training. I want to say the first thing was like in the summertime before I think June I started, but it was probably right in June, mid-June, we had 3 weeks of training. And so essentially it was about 500 and something applicants that came in to go into this program all across the country and a few people internationally. I was one of about 40 or 50 people that got accepted into it. So that was like our class basically. And so you're talking about a multinational, multi-billion-dollar company. So it's not like it's just a little mom and pop shop. Like, our business is smaller, right? Much smaller. So we wouldn't be bringing in 40, 50 people at once necessarily. I don't know about your business, but the point is like they brought in a lot of people and they expected those people to stay. That's why they vetted them. They took 10% of who applied. And that was after being pre-qualified even before that. So point is like, it was significant. You talk about like the regimen or the process and stuff. It was 3 weeks of training, everything from some technical stuff, but mostly like interpersonal development, kind of credo-based. They're a very credo-based company. So like values and stuff, making sure that people kind of can get through that and still feel like they still want to be there. Kind of, it's almost like a trial essentially to see if you're really a good fit. I think everybody stayed. Maybe one person might have been like, all right, this is too much. Like, I can't take this. Because it was 3 weeks of like all day in different meetings, like scheduled for us by like a program director that ran the leadership program. We stayed in the same hotel. So it was kind of cool. Like we had like camaraderie. So it was kind of this team oriented thing as well. We met people at different operating companies within J&J. So there was, there's about 250 different operating companies all across Johnson & Johnson. And so some people were working in pure IT. Some people were working at one of the operating companies doing like, supply chain support and things like that or whatever, retail, whatever. So it was a nice mix there. Great networking opportunity. But the core of it was just kind of getting started was more or less vetting you as a person that was brought on to make sure you're a good fit still. And also getting you kind of like all that preliminary sort of getting you sort of J&J-ized, I guess, or that's not a term, obviously, but getting you kind of in the J&J culture.
You got to convert you to the culture.
Exactly. They kind of, I hate to say, nothing against J&J, but like almost like brainwashing it to some extent to get you ready for corporate, right? Like it's like getting you into the matrix.
It's not a bad thing. I think that we need to be more open to brainwashing. There's certain things that have been given a bad connotation. I was in church the other day, and they were talking about kind of our belief in Christ, and they're like, "Oh, well, we're not a cult," and I'm just like, "Sure as heck, I am a cult. I'm part of the cult. It's the best cult in the world. Everybody should be part of my cult." Like there's nothing wrong with the word cult. Literally, it means
it's the connotation of everything. You're right.
So what I learned, because I posted on Facebook, and I was like, "What the heck? Why is being part of a cult a bad thing? Like, why does it have this negative connotation?" Well, there's two words. There's cult, C-U-L-T. Got to make sure I say it
right
without saying any bad words.
Right.
So there's cult, and then there's occult, which is O-C-C-U-L-T. And occult is where it's like almost demonic and really, they're captive. They don't want the people to leave. It's kind of the negative side of an organization.
Right.
But a cult is just having a devotion towards a certain ideal, individual or ideology. So it's like, well, why would you not want to be part of the cult? And why is it a bad thing to be part of the cult? And if you think that you're going to leave one cult, you're just going to go join another cult.
So you're either joining, in your terms, like a cult, or you're choosing not to be in a cult, which is also a cult of itself. It's the same thing.
Because now you're the anti-cult, but it's still a cult, right?
Yeah, so exactly.
Like, people don't realize what they're saying. Yeah. And so with this specifically, brainwashing, like I brainwash myself every freaking day. And if you're not brainwashing yourself, somebody else is. Like, and if you think that that's not true, you're an idiot. Like, no offense to anybody. Like, you're being brainwashed. So are you willing to subject yourself to the brainwashing that's happening? And if you're not, then you need to be conscious of what's going on and remove yourself or dig in. It's like the concept of like mindfulness. Like, that's something I'm exploring a little bit more now, as far as like, getting to be aware of how your mind operates and your subconscious and stuff. But like, you're either doing it for yourself, or you're letting someone else do it for you. Like, and Grant Cardone talks about, you're the selling or you're being sold, pretty much. That's the same thing. It's like you're in or you're out. It's pretty much black and white. But yeah, I would say that. So they got you to that point where like you were part of the J&J culture, we'll call it. But I know exactly what you're saying. Like, I'm on the same page. And so from that point, it was pretty much, boots at the ground, and then you're working with your first manager. And so there was still a lot of on the job training. So the manager of, I remember, because actually my group, when I got further in the company, was actually looking for some of these newer folks that came in as the IT LDP, which is the entry level, rotational program. We would get candidates that we'd have the ability to pick from and hire from. And so one of the things would be that we'd have to commit to give them a certain amount of on-the-job training, besides just like kind of like internship, almost in a way. Like, it's not called an internship, but you have to help them beyond just their job requirements to become better people for the company. But ultimately, the win is that you're getting a staff member, and I don't know how they did with budgeting and stuff, but it had something to do with that too. Like, it wasn't tracked as different. It was the company, the bigger entity that owned J&J, like the main entity, kind of subsidized some of the costs, I think, because of this. So point is, all that being said, I don't have all the intricacies of that, but the point is, after the first rotation, you then opt to go for another rotation, but you'd have to apply for that position. So we'd have like info sessions. And so whatever companies wanted to bring on a person like you, you'd have what's available. You kind of like look at the job postings, and then you'd have to apply for that job, but you'd be guaranteed a position. It just would be which one would be selected based upon your qualifications. So we did that. And then taking the second position. And then in the process of that, there's a lot of elements of mentorship. So you talk about the program, like it's not just on the job training, but like either your manager or your director. When at J&J, the matrix was like, analyst, senior analyst, lead, and then like manager, and then director. So like the director would be responsible for all the managers and all the people below. That would typically be the person that would be like mentoring the newer person or newer people and the rest of the team. But you'd have like a separate meeting. So that was a part of the kind of program to make sure you had like a certain regimen, like once a month, once every few months, at least one-on-one with that director, notwithstanding the fact that you had meetings with them and stuff. And then your manager would kind of be like a junior mentor, kind of guiding you, like I said before, on the job and stuff like that. And then once you finish with the 2 years, essentially the 3 rotations, then the expectation is that you would bid for regular postings, or you get placed into a position, but you still have to apply for it. There would be a certain amount of positions available. And some of the people that you worked for would be looking for you to come on, quote unquote, like full-time as like a regular full-time FTE, right? Full-time equivalent or whatever. And so that's what kind of happened with me. So my first rotation was with like reporting and metrics. I did like some more analytical type work in Excel and stuff. And then my second rotation was procurement. I did some analytical stuff, but specifically for the IT procurement division that was doing like what are called RFPs, so like requests for proposals with the suppliers for IT. And then my third rotation was enterprise security. And so essentially
the second rotation was the most attractive. So at the end of the third rotation, I could have just stayed with that group. There was an opportunity to stay with enterprise security, but it wasn't my forte. It wasn't something I was as interested in. So I decided to kind of reapply for the procurement opportunity. So a lot of the same people that have like the rotational program stuff in the first 2 years would then open up a job placement for the whole program to bid on, basically. So that's kind of in a summary of how it kind of
No, that's cool, because I've been thinking about how we could implement it in my business, because we're always expanding, always recruiting new people, but then it's like sometimes because they're always at like everybody's at different levels, then it's hard to give everybody adequate training, because then like if you got somebody who's been around for a year and they're at a different level, they need a different level of training. But if you take somebody who's brand new day one and you give them a year person's training, it's like, what the heck? This is way over my head. I'm out, And it's like, oh, stick around, just stick around and hear it. But it is. It's an interesting thing. So this is to kind of feed into this next part. You say corporate America, you learned a lot. And I think this almost puts me at a disadvantage as an entrepreneur, I believe. Not that like I'm doing everything I can to get the experience still and paying and whatever. But when every entrepreneur, as you mentioned, you need a team. You need to like build a team.
Yep.
Every entrepreneur needs an army of people, corporate guys, willing to implement their vision. You know? And the problem is, if you're just an entrepreneur, this is where I came from. I've been working. So I did like landscaping. I worked for myself, landscaping, contracting work. The only corporate job I ever had that I'm aware of, three. I was a lifeguard for YMCA. You can barely call that a corporate job.
Right. Yeah.
I was a waiter at Pizza Hut. Again, you can barely call that a corporate job, but it was corporate. And I worked at a truck wash for a truck washing company. Those are like the only corporate jobs I've had ever in my life. Everything else has been more entrepreneurial. And so to your point in the beginning of your story, like structure and time management stuff, I've always been able to manage my own time and my own schedule, because that's all I've known. But when you have other people that are transitioning out of employee lifestyle and into a more entrepreneurial or entrepreneurial endeavor, it's difficult to communicate with them because they're so ingrained in somebody else needs to create a structure. But I never even knew what a structure looked like, because I'd never been part of one. So I'm like, geez, I don't know. I'm trying to create this structure for these people. And I'm failing miserably, flailing in the water, drowning. But I mean, whatever. You just keep going. You keep implementing. Keep getting feedback. Hey, what does it look like? Hey, you work for corporate. What's better? Like, show me a better way. I'll adopt it right now. So that's why I always ask. Like,
that's cool.
What type of things did you learn from corporate America that when you started on your own and started implementing into? Because now you run a business as well. So how did you take what you learned from corporate America, apply it to entrepreneurship, and then duplicate the good things you liked into your own business? Like how did that transition happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, just a couple additional things on that. So I think, you got to pick and choose what makes sense. So to your point, I identified after I learned more about like the concept of like visionary versus like integrator, for example, which is another, I'll give a quick shout out to the book called Traction. I don't know if you've heard of Traction or not, but Gino Wickman, I don't know him personally, but that's a great book recommendation. I recommend for any entrepreneur or even aspiring entrepreneur that's looking to get some clarity on like where they fall into that sort of what you just described, was just like a spectrum of like, am I really like high level, like creative type thinker, visionary style, or am I more like tactical speaking, like on the ground, managerial integration type style? And I think me personally, I'm probably like you, I think in terms of visionary. I was being forced to operate in a managerial type of integration capacity in corporate. Like most people are, unless you're doing like creative or you're responsible for like business development or something like that, or your sales. Probably, most of those other like the ones that I said, the ones that aren't those are pretty much focused on like a lot of regiment, a lot of focus and structure. So, and even those other ones in corporate are still structured, right? But the point is, I had to pick and choose which elements would apply. So for me, I was lucky in the sense that a lot of my time in corporate was spent in things that were relevant to what I could use in my own business. So like technology, for example, is ever encompassing, overarching across any business. You need some technical structure. So web development I had done on the side, but I'd also done some of that stuff in terms of my corporate positions. Like when I was doing reporting and metrics, I was doing ASP and web development type stuff. Procurement definitely was important for me. So I was able to get an experience there where I learned about how to buy stuff basically and negotiate. And now I'm a real estate buyer, basically a buyer and seller of real estate myself. So again, we look for houses that are basically good deals, essentially, and we negotiate with sellers or people that procure those opportunities, and then real estate agents and real estate homeowners and stuff. But ultimately, we try to buy at a good price, and then we basically just look to add value. And so that's where, negotiation is super, super important. So I got a lot of experience, and not just my own experience, but also being around other people that were basically like master negotiators, because these people have been doing decades of like procurement stuff, some of them supply chain and procurement. So I definitely brought a lot of that sort of like softer skill, I would say. I'm still learning a lot, like yourself, everybody has to learn. We're always a student, but I got a lot of that experience and direct knowledge and whatnot from that corporate experience. But I'll tell you, like some of the things that I don't really like to use PowerPoint nearly as much anymore. Like PowerPoint was the thing. Excel, same thing. I could use Excel, but I'm talking about like using Excel for like VLOOKUPs, HLOOKUPs, macros, all kinds of stuff that's super, super technical. That's probably not as practical for most business owners. I didn't need that. So I just kind of kept that. If I had to do it now, like pivot tables, maybe like I've used pivot tables on occasion in Excel, but it's not my like must do all the time kind of thing. So what I've found, you mentioned the 4-hour work week, is like, a big thing also that I got out of corporate was actually outsourcing and offshoring. So before I even read the 4-hour work week, I had known about it because I was hiring people I was part of the teams hiring people from all across the world to work on IT projects for J&J. And so I saw the economies of scale firsthand. I saw people that were getting paid, what would cost $30 or $40 an hour in the United States cost, $8 to $10 an hour in a different country for a corporate client, So there's a level of like certain deliverables that those people that are getting paid even $8 to $10 an hour would deliver versus the person. Like now we have people, and I'm not ashamed to say it, like we use a platform called Upwork to bring people in that are $4 to $6 an hour on average. And my average in the past, 7 years, we've spent close to $200,000 just on virtual assistants that have averaged between $4 and $4.50 an hour, and have helped create the majority of what our business structure actually is behind the scenes: back office technology, the email marketing we do, some of the texting, the email inquiries that we get for certain stuff in our business, even a lot of the phone work, sales, front office type stuff, we use virtual assistants to do. So that experience came as a result of a combination between the corporate experience, but also when I first started in real estate investing, the mentor that I was working with at the time in 2014 kind of brought to light the way that how simply it is. You just go on the internet and go to this website. At that time, it was called Odesk. And you go to Odesk, and that's probably what Tim Ferriss talks about, I think, in 4-hour work week. I think it was Odesk or something like that. But that became basically Upwork. Upwork kind of was another thing. They bought it, and here we are now. But that's kind of some of the key elements, I would say, is technology, procurement and negotiation, and also the outsourcing concept, for sure.
I love it. Let's just add a little context to the wage gap here, because I think that a lot of people get worked up about this, and I never really got worked up about it. I was like, that's awesome. Not from a taking advantage, but people think that people should get paid what they think they should get paid. You have to put in perspective, $4 an hour in the Philippines or some of these places, that's more like if you were to pay
4 to 5 times more,
or $10 or $12 an hour, which is still not really a livable wage in America. But if you were to pay them somebody creating a graphic for you or a video editor, whatever it is, pay them that would mean they're making more than the doctors, than the lawyers. It would actually ruin their economy. And this is where people need a bigger understanding of just global business. But when you pay somebody too much money, then inflation happens in a society, and all of the prices of stuff gravitates towards the highest price they can charge for something, because they all want money as well. Well, what that does is all the people who aren't lucky enough to have a job with you getting paid $12 American dollars an hour, then all of them no longer can afford to eat. So it's actually, it sounds counterintuitive, but it is important to recognize, yes, it's less expensive from an American dollar perspective to outsource, but what you're doing when you're paying those normal wages for it's actually better for their society than if you were to say, oh, well, I think I want to be this charitable person and
pay them like a U.S. person.
That's one person's life. Well, while you're blessing this one person's life, you're screwing over 100 people and making it so they can't eat or feed their children. So don't get any weird ideas of charity or philanthropy until you go visit the place and experience it and find out what they really need. That's not to say don't be philanthropic, okay? I'm not saying that. Right. But be wise with your philanthropy.
Yeah.
Philanthropy. That's right. Don't just go out and kind of shoot from the hip. Like, be wise and get educated before you end up destroying something. There's a great movie. I don't know if you ever watched it. I don't know if I'd say it's a great movie. It's a good movie with Ashton Kutcher. Okay. The Butterfly Effect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But like that movie is so like, oh, okay, when I affect one thing over here, it throws out a bunch of stuff in life that you don't think one little decision is going to affect. And so you got to just be aware, like try and be just more aware, more conscious of how your actions are impacting other people. And that goes for everything, whether it's in your relationship, your marriage, with your kids, your business, it doesn't matter. 100%. What are the small decisions and how are those impacting the people around you? I think that we could all be a little bit more aware of those things. So we are like running out of time here. So I've got... we didn't even talk about your business, but tell us more about your real estate and why you love doing real estate. Like, why did you go from the corporate world into real estate?
So it was sort of accidental. I was looking at different opportunities to build side streams of income while I was working in corporate, and I landed into a funnel of sorts. You know, people were familiar with ClickFunnels, but I was in a funnel. Basically, it was back in 2014 before that even got to be a thing. I think ClickFunnels wasn't even probably a company yet. But it was another person's funnel. And essentially this guy offered mentorship for real estate investors that wanted to flip properties without their own money, which sounded pretty cool. I heard stories about it as a kid, but I never knew much about how it worked. And so I went through the process. I had a call with somebody and I spoke to the guy and asked him a bunch of questions. I went on a training, so on and so forth. And it just seemed like, man, this is like, I wanted to do something with real estate from a young age. I had owned my own house, but I had never understood real estate investing, even as a landlord. I mean, I knew it again, but I didn't really get it. Like I didn't get the concept at that time. And let alone to how to flip a house without actually using my own money or almost none of my own money. So basically I explored that. I decided to go with them for like a year to work with them as a mentorship client of theirs, paid them a bunch of money, learned a bunch about the business, understood the intricacies, learned about, things like the VAs, for example. I learned about the sort of logistics of real estate investing and how to find properties, where to go to source deals, how to get off-market opportunities, how to analyze opportunities, how to negotiate in real estate terminology and stuff with the jargon, all that kind of thing, how to deal with homeowners, how to solve problems, how to not, offer too much, but offer the right amount, things like that. Did all that and kind of finally, after like 6 months of like grueling effort, finally landed my first deal. We ended up flipping a contract. So that's sort of the niche that we play into, is we flip contracts and we flip opportunities. And that segment of the business is how we started. And just full disclosure, you have to check with your local laws and state laws, because some of this stuff is not allowed in certain states anymore. So you got to be careful with that. This is not like no financial or legal advice, all that kind of stuff.
None of that's happening here. We're just finding out why you went into real estate, what you learned. That's it.
So essentially that's what we started doing. And since then we've kind of refined the process. So we do that in New Jersey, which is, we do it above board, obviously. And we have also flipped properties. So we've wholesaled essentially, which is a contract flip, either an assignment or an LLC, which is a detail that people may not be familiar with, because I know it's not a real estate focused audience, but that we've done about 220 of those to date as of this time right now we're talking. So, and then we've flipped about 50 or so fix and flip properties, and I've owned probably about a dozen or so doors and rentals over the years, but I've sold all that since, and been focusing my time recently on basically a handful of things. So I do help other people. So, I don't know if this is the right time to mention now, but I do help other people understand. Yeah. So I help people that are aspiring business owners in general, but mostly my niche has been people that want to get into real estate investing and real estate in general, to navigate what's possible, what they want to do. So I've had clients that were contractors. I've had clients that were working in corporate. I've had clients that are real estate agents. I've had clients that don't have a job right now that are looking for a transition. Like I've had all kinds of clients over the years. I've worked with over 100 different people over the past like 6-7 years, basically figuring out what they want to do and then helping them implement those strategies in terms of real estate investing, what's possible. So essentially, right now I offer that to people as coaching and consulting. I also own a title insurance company as a partner. I have right now about 8 or 9 fix and flip projects going on between New Jersey and Florida. And I just recently linked up, which I don't know if I even mentioned to you, Sam, was I recently just linked up with a direct lending company that I'm part of their fund. So I help originate loans for a direct lending company that helps real estate investors buy more property by leveraging capital, basically.
Sure.
So that's what I do with them. And so essentially I'm all real estate investing. I'm not a real estate agent, although I'm considering possibly getting my license just to have another stream of income there for the my own projects or for other people that contact me and ask me if I can list their property. I look at it from a business standpoint. So I like to see about how do I learn something and do it? And then how do I then figure out how to get someone else to run that for me so I can continue to participate, but give them a piece of the action. So I've done that with my companies over the years. And that's how I've kind of built up like a mini portfolio of businesses over the past 7 years with my stuff. So kind of if you want to learn more about, who I am and my story, you can check out my website, which is douglasjbeck.com. Pretty simple, douglasjbeck.com. That has like a link out to each of my different companies and kind of a video about who I am, some of the things we talked about today. But I think we got a really cool conversation today. Went deeper than I usually go. So that's really neat about like my previous stuff. If we have an opportunity to talk again, I'd love to do that too. I think there's some additional things we can get into, but
sure.
It's not the point. That's it's cool to talk to somebody, Sam, that, you have your experience and your background. That sounds like we're on the same wavelength with a lot of different things here. So whatever else you have for me, and I'm here for you and your audience. So tell me if you got anything else you want. If otherwise, we can pick it up next time.
Sure. Well, no, we got a few questions here, but to your point, I try and listen to most of my guests on other podcasts before I interview them, and I never want to reproduce the same thing somebody else has asked you. Like my goal is to make all my questions not something you've been asked. So Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I really want to bring a unique perspective because ultimately, and I don't know if you guys have been like thinking about this throughout the podcast, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but for me, it's all about legacy. It's all about how do you ultimately want to be remembered and what about my life is worth being remembered. And all of these little things, these are character traits that have built Douglas to who he is. Right? These are the little inner commitments that he's going to pass on to his kids, that his dad passed on to him, the competitiveness, the stick-to-itiveness, the excellence, the not giving up, the waking up on time, showing up on time, like all of that stuff, it's built into who somebody is. And that's the more important thing. What he does, how he earns his money, that's great. But ultimately, who he is what's important. The life that he gets to live, right? And when you go through a transition where you have all the time, all your time is structured, and then you go from, okay, now there's no structure and you have to start structuring your own time, you find out real quick who you really are. Like there's not like secrets. Your wife is like, hey, you got to get out of the house, you got to go do something. Your kids are like, hey, you're sticking around a lot lately. Like, are we going to be able to have our house next month? Like, is there money coming in? What's going on? So there's got to be a balance but it's the next stage of life. It's about control of your being and how do you reach the best self that you can be. Yeah. So I love it. So go for it.
No, I was just going to say, man, I think one of the topics that I sometimes, maybe we could touch upon this today, but some of the things I coach some of my clients on is actually the business of life, basically. So, you basically covered that with me today with my own story, essentially, like how it led up to this point. So there's elements of who you are as a person, the subconscious, the way you think, the way you operate, and then how that translates into your business life or lack thereof, and vice versa. Like there's this ecosystem back and forth, I think. And so a lot of people, I think, as entrepreneurs, we want to have that structure to kind of discipline ourselves to be able to create like family time, which is very important. But I think that if your family understands your business and if your business understands your family, like it's a win-win either way. Like you have to look at it both sides. You have to have this integration of everything as a business owner. And that's something that doesn't exist usually. Like when you're working a corporate job, we're trained to think like I check in at this time and I leave at that time. And then I'm out and then I go to my family or I go to my own thing, whatever. You're not focusing on like, how do I pull it all together necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
So
that's like your life. For me, my life is my business and my business is my life. And
pretty much
some people don't like that about me. Actually, even family members, if they reach out to me like, hey, when can we do something? I'm like, here, I'll send you my calendar link. Like, get it scheduled. I'm excited. Let's meet, let's chat.
Let's do it.
But some family members are like, oh, what do you mean? Sending me your assistant or your calendar app? I'm like, look, I've created a way to structure my life and it works for me. And I'm not saying anything negative about anybody else, but like at some point you got to protect your structure and that's how it is, as however it is. So I'm curious, what right now, let's see if you're conscious. What do you think is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
That's a deep question, man. I mean, what's going on in my life and also my business life is a lot of pivoting, right? So we're pivoting in our business and we're pivoting and I'm also pivoting personally in certain ways. So what's holding me back really is just the amount of time that I can put in personally of what I need to do and also my team's time and focus. And really, the element of execution to the extent that what we want to achieve. So like I talked before about visionary versus integrator, for example. So I'm definitely the visionary, but sometimes my challenge is that the people I count on to do integration, including myself, right? Because I still have to play that integration kind of lead, has to put in the amount of time necessary. And so with my life situation, funny enough, like we moved to Florida back last year, right? So, and we've transitioned down here now in Sarasota from New Jersey for living there my whole life. And it's been a great transition. It's awesome. But at the same time, it also creates a lot of uncertainty because we need to figure out, right now we're in a place where we don't own the house we're in right now, which is kind of funny. People are like, oh, you have all the success. Like, why don't you own the property you live in? Well, that's a whole other story for another day, but it's not making me any money. So again, the Grant Cardone principle, like rent where you live and own where you rent, but we can get into that some other time. But the point is, I am looking to build a house or buy a house that I can live in. That's going to be my like forever home, my family. So you add that in with the element of like dealing with COVID and the impact COVID's had on our businesses for different reasons. The real estate market's very tricky. So all these different pressures, right, are kind of combined into, hey, we either it's like fight or flight. You either got to do something or you got to figure out a new way, or you got to change your position. You got to pivot. And so we've done some of that pivoting, but we're kind of evolving in the process, is realizing, wow, we've like turned over a new thing we never even knew existed because we weren't focusing on pivoting. We were just so focused on what was working at the time. So that creates like new work to do plus the existing stuff, So you got execution plus like strategy and then new execution. And then you got to figure out which of the original execution do I just drop off? Like, do I still do that stuff or do I just like eliminate that completely? Do I take the team I've built over the past 7 years and tell them to keep doing what they're doing? Or do I bring some of them over to the new thing that's going to be even better than the first thing we were doing? So a lot of that's sort of happening right now. So it's really about getting clarity and being directive to the team and helping get an understanding and kind of creating the new vision for the companies. And then for my life, it's similar in the sense that we've also just like changed sort of our living situation, and also we have our kids that were working at school, at home for school, basically for the first couple of months, and also for last year, before we moved to Florida, they were at home and stuff. So that created a lot of different things where we had to bring somebody to help us out with the kids, so I could focus on the business. My wife could do what she had to do. It's all this kind of constant evolution, if you would, of the family unit. And so I think what's holding us back is just kind of taking a breath and just like settling into something. Really, we have to settle in. We've already we know, I know, and my family knows, my team knows, I think in my companies, what we have to do, and we're doing some of it, but now we got to get even further along the path of doing it,
Absolutely. So what's been your greatest, how do I say this? What's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished to this point in your life?
Man, the hardest thing I ever accomplished. That's a really tough question, man. I'm thinking back. A couple of things come to mind, so I'll probably pick one, but I'll give a couple answers. So I think my wife might kill me, but getting married probably was one of the most challenging things because at that time, I was in my early 20s. And so I made some sacrifices while I was in college to be dedicated to my wife, which I love. And we've been married now 12 plus years. So that was a difficult decision, but it's been a blessing. The biggest blessing is that her plus the 3 beautiful children that we have. My son's 10, 7, and I have a 7-year-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. So a lot of awesome experiences and memories that have been created, but it was difficult as a 20-something-year-old kid in college, as an athlete, as a kid that liked to go out with his friends, to kind of make some trade-offs there. But again, like, not to go back to business principles, there's a lot of sacrifices you got to make to be a business owner, and to especially leave corporate to go, which is kind of tied into my next thing. Like, I think leaving a 6-figure paying job, like, and a company that is renowned as one of the best companies in the world to work for and such, and they still are. It's not because Doug left that it becomes a bad thing. Like, it's not like I left for a bad reason. I left because of my own reasons. I left because I wanted to go grow something on my own that I knew I could create. But that was a very difficult decision to make because at the time I had, like I said, 2 little kids, my wife counting on me financially. And although we had some success, we weren't like far along in our success of real estate. We had just kind of scratched the surface. We weren't really beyond the path of like understanding to where we were like so confident certainty financially was coming every single month. Money was, we don't work in a residual income stream type business. It's really transactional, generally speaking. So those 2 things are pretty much the 2 I would say. And then it's every day they're difficult decisions, but those are the 2 that stand out from a life perspective, I would say. Yeah.
Awesome. And then what's been your greatest success to this point in your life?
I think some of this 2 same things, actually, funny enough, like marrying my wife and starting a family at a young age. Now, I'm in my 30s and I have children that I can go out and have fun and be active. I'm living an active lifestyle. I get to the gym every single day, Monday through Friday, to be fair, but I'm also active on the weekends with them. But I'm able to do that because I left, I have my family, which I can appreciate and spend time with, but I can now actually spend more time with them because I left corporate. So it's all kind of works hand in hand. And I think that that's important. Like that's maybe some wisdom there, that some of the times the things that are the most difficult decisions to make are actually the biggest blessings in your life. Sure. Once you make them, and so that's kind of what I see. I mean, I didn't say it that way on purpose, by the way. I just kind of like flowed the way I felt. So you've kind of prompted me. I don't know if that was on purpose on your part, but like that's kind of like that's what feels right, man. Like those two things. Really.
That's good. I love it. And if there was one secret, I say secret, give us the juice, give us what you're not giving everybody else.
Okay.
Secret habit, mindset, or behavior that you're religious about that you think contributes the most to your success, what would that be?
Man, I would have said something different probably about 6 months ago, but this one might be something random for the audience and for you. You got to learn about how your body works with energy levels, and you got to understand the circadian rhythm. You got to understand also intermittent fasting. Quick shout out to my buddy Colin Newell up in New Jersey. He's got a thing called the Panda Diet, so check him out. Quick shout out to him. He was a big game changer for me, man, back in the end of summer last year, right? So I'm an entrepreneur. I'm active to a certain extent, but I wasn't getting religiously to the gym. I wasn't eating at the right time of day. I wasn't monitoring my intake. I wasn't worried about that. And basically from August of last year, and I've had this happen over the years because of my athleticism and stuff, but like I got into a rut where I wasn't going to the gym every day. I wasn't consistently hitting a certain time. I wasn't eating certain things, certain time. And I wasn't cognizant of what was happening, how I was operating my physical self. Like I just wasn't. So when I created more of a structure, from August of 2020 until basically March, I dropped about 30 pounds. And I've gotten a lot stronger since. And 30 pounds of me is like 10, 12% of my body, basically. So that's a pretty significant drop. I mean, some people it could be more significant, obviously a woman or something like that. But I'm talking about like, this was predominantly from eating a certain way, and getting to a routine of going to the gym. But I don't want to sound like a cliche, like, oh, get to the gym and eat healthy kind of guy. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you start your day without, and this is just, again, talk to somebody you trust about this, but this is my personal opinion. Start your day without eating a meal and get to the gym for at least 30, 45 minutes. You'll create a level of energy in your body and clarity in your mental capacity beyond what you thought you would have. It might suck in the first few days, but when you do that and then you reward yourself with some food and you train your body to think about food as a reward versus a requirement, and you have the right kind of food, you're going to see dramatic shifts in your physical self, but also your mental clarity about what you have to do for the rest of your life and the people that count on you. So that's, for me, it's most recently what's been a major shift for me, and a secret, I guess you could say, from a living life perspective,
Cool. So, I love it, man. I love it. That is Sam's next frontier. I was just watching a video of myself like 4 years ago doing a speech, and I was like, dang, I was 30 pounds ago, and I looked like a little boy. Like I looked thin. I actually, the funny thing is, I like how I look right now.
You don't look like you're over. Yeah, you look great.
Oh, I'm not overweight. Don't get me wrong. I'm not overweight, but 30 pounds, most of that's in my legs and on my belt. But here's my like stupid thing that I tell myself, right? That I know is just total BS, and one day I'm going to care. It's just not today. But when I flex, I can still see a six pack ish. I mean, there's obviously a layer of fat on it, but like, if I had better posture and I stood up straighter, you wouldn't probably have a belly. And when I flex, I've got six little bumps, so I'm good, Yeah,
that's right, man. You got me beat on that one. I'll tell you that much. But I'm working on it.
But really though, it is my next. Before the end of the year, I think I'll have it cleaned up. I'll be back. I've got to have somebody. I don't love eating, so it's got to be something where it's like, if I'm going to eat something, it's got to be valuable, and
exactly.
And I need it more regimented and prepared, because it's just like, otherwise it doesn't happen. Like today, I still haven't eaten today. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
So I mean, it depends. It could be a good thing, it's fasting, so that your body, your hormone levels change. So it depends on what you're doing it for, if it's on purpose or not, I guess, right?
I think it could be good if I was aware of my hormone levels, and if I was aware of my blood, and I was aware of all my vitamins, and I was making sure that I was still nutriently taken care of. Yeah. And I just choose not to eat. That's a different story than just my story.
You're busy because you forgot to get food or something.
I just don't think about it. Or it's a nuisance. But anyways, I love it. Final question. Okay, so we got to pretend that you've died and your great-great-great-great-grandchildren, so this is 6 generations away, sitting around the kitchen table, discussing your life, the impact you had, and the legacy that you left. What do you want them to be saying about you 6 generations from now?
Man, that's deep, man. I think that I want to have a level of respect that I wasn't, although I had my own success, I wasn't focused just on my own, but I was willing to give to the people that needed the help to get that. So like, to kind of take myself back from even a young age, I was always, my college essay was about helping others, right? Like it wasn't just like a facade. It was truly how I felt and the way I was brought up and stuff about being selfless. And so I want my kids, and so on and so forth to be saying, man, my dad or my granddad or my great granddad, or whoever, he made an impact. Like he helped create like what you're doing, man, which is really cool. Like you're creating a community of sorts, a level of like lasting impact to others to change their perspective on life and potentially change their life story, like in a very significant and positive way. So that's why I do what I do with the coaching that I do and the consulting stuff I do. That's why I'm on the internet with my videos that I put out. It's why I meet with folks like you to talk more about like masterminding on this kind of stuff and impacting other people, because that's something that, this video, this podcast, this everything we're doing here is hopefully going to last for many generations in some way, shape, or form. So it leaves a true legacy, like you're saying, like, and somebody that might hear this, a year, 10 years, 20 years on the line, might get one little nugget that's going to change their perspective of how they live their life and how their families. So the butterfly effect concept, what you said before, like let situations like this, our conversation, be one more effect, if you would, or might have one more effect on the rest of the world for the creation of a better world, basically. But in my microcosm of my world, it's like contribution, really. It's like leaving a level of contribution that will impact in a very significant way for those that can be contributed towards, right? Like have them improve. That's what I want them to think of me as. Like he wasn't just about Doug. He gave himself to the world to help the world. Mm-hmm. Which I think as a Christian, for what it's worth, it's like living like Christ. Like you give yourself, and for those of you that understand that, give yourself to others. Like he didn't put himself first. So that's a lot of my moral standards, I guess you could say, the way I was brought up and stuff and what I believe in.
For sure. No, I'm so grateful. And that's been my experience of you. I'm so grateful that you've been willing to answer all my questions and not balk at any of them.
Man, of course. Good questions. You're a really good interviewer, man. You're really good. You do a good job. Yeah.
Hey, I appreciate that. I've failed a lot, so it's only from experience. That's it. But I've listened. So when I started getting into podcasting, I actually listened to probably 7 or 8 hours worth of podcasts on double or triple speed, depending on the podcast. For probably a year and a half before I would write down, hey, I really like the flow of this guy's podcast. Don't love the questions, but I like the flow. I like the sound. I studied the top 10 business podcasts for 2 years. Awesome. I listened to hundreds of hours worth of episodes to kind of create how I do mine. Now, I'm not saying mine's the best or that it's how I like it, right? I like that it doesn't get edited. Nothing gets edited. We throw something on the beginning and on the end. And it is what it is, right? You get to hear a conversation. Some people are like,
real, man. Yeah.
You should take out all the dead space. More people want to hear it better. They want better audio. I'm like, you know what? I like my podcast the way I like it. So if you don't like my podcast, go listen to something else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right, man. No, that's called being authentic and being real, man. I think that's important.
So anyway, I love it. I'm so grateful for you.
Likewise, man. Thank you.
And I'm excited for this to drop.
Cool. That's awesome, man. Appreciate that, Sam. So you let me know, man. If we want to follow up, you keep me posted. I don't know, I'll stand by for now, and then good luck with everything you got going on. I know you told me about it before, so hopefully that goes well for you, and we'll be in touch, man.
Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.